Sweet friends, how do you do today? And how do you woo today? And how do you woo you today? Welcome to How to Woo, a podcast on love and making love so we can make sure we're making lives we love. I am your host, Luna Robbie. I am a multi-artist and creative guide obsessed with learning about life, especially from other humans direct, because we all have our own unique perspective and wisdom. So here we are again for some deep listening and a little vicrophilia so we can stay excited about life and co-create a world where taking care of each other is the norm. Let's dive in. It was 6 years ago today that I launched this podcast, and I am finally brave enough to do something that I have thought about doing every New Year's Eve since the inception of this show. I'm going back to my very first episode where I interview myself, and I'm updating it. And I want to emphasize here, this podcast is not one that you need to listen to chronologically. In fact, I personally would prefer if you listened to the most recent episodes and then worked your way backwards, especially if you would like to interact with me in real time in any way, shape, or form. So part of this episode will be me answering the newer questions that I did not think to ask back in 2018, and part of it will be my own director's cut with commentary from the almost 2025 me reflecting on the 2018 me, because I never could have imagined all of the ways that I could have changed in the truly short time that is 6 years. It's a shorty longy time. I've been thinking about time a lot. There's fasty slowy time, shorty longy time, like it all stretches out and it all goes by so fast somehow simultaneously. Time's not linear, quantum physics, etc. But my hope in sharing these reflections is not only to update you on the current me, but also to encourage our own collective, ongoing self-reflection. We are humans. I assume if you're listening to this, you are a human, or if you are an animal and have consciousness and I just don't know how to speak your language yet. Hi, I love you. But no matter what species we are, we will, of course, inevitably change. And I think that the more that we do our best to grow in the ways that we actually want, the more likely we are to lead better laid lives, full of the type of connection that inspires us to cultivate our creative selves. So that we can spend our time on this planet appreciating the beauty of what the world actually is, instead of spending all our time, attention, and energy in triggered amygdala mode, worrying about problems and things that we cannot actually control and buying stuff to try to soothe our little nervous systems, because that is easier than addressing the larger, often emotionally scarier underlying issues. And it is actual New Year's Eve as I am recording this. So over the past 6 years, I have heard so many reflections on the podcast. People who hate it, people who love it, people who think I should create all the laws, people who think that politics have absolutely nothing to do with our intimate lives, LOL, people who broke up or got divorced because they listened, and so many more of you who have dared to let your partners know deeper truths about your ever-evolving selves. And I myself have shed so many tears related to this podcast. I've discovered modern censorship because of this podcast. I accidentally learned that I am probtistic, which is my personal term for probably autistic, but I have no desire to get a DSM label. But I read a textbook on autism and I seem to line up with what it says in lots of ways. So I've been asked from all sorts of dozens of helpful neurodivergent sweetie pies, do you know if you're on the autism spectrum? And I've also learned that my friends who do not identify as neurodivergent have never received such a question. I have also shared much too much personal information in real time on pod that had reverberations in my own personal life that were really difficult to navigate. And I've also learned about parasocial relationships and what I can and can't rely on from friends and listeners and internet strangers who I think are friends and listeners, but actually have sneaky underlying ulterior motives of treating me like a free disposable sex toy rather than a full thoughtful human being. LOL, the internet is an interesting place. And as I have decided to explore and express my true self, or my current understanding of my true self, the self that I have been learning about a lot since my late 20s, what I considered my artistry has been labeled as sex work. First, as an OnlyFans model, when I thought that I was offering fine art nudes, exploring what it is like to inhabit my physical container as a femme with almost no hair. Later, or I guess simultaneously, but a little bit later, as a creator of this podcast, i.e. erotic audio by some people's standards, though in my personal opinion, the whole point of this podcast has always been to add emotional context to intimate and physical relationships, because when Me Too was unfolding, and that was the whole impetus behind this, it became very clear to me that many thought leaders in this world, including people with huge media presences, do not know how or are uncomfortable with having thoughtful, meaningful conversations about sex that do not include shame and blame. And I find it so interesting that in a time where so many can clearly point to what not to do, you're bad and wrong if you do this, there is, as far as I can see, no such widespread agreement on how exactly one should behave, what exactly one should do instead. So, I continue to hope that we can co-create this together. And I am so fucking grateful to all of you who are along for this ride, whether this is your first episode you're listening to, or whether you have let me be in your ears all 6 years. And should you feel inspired to share your story, I am very certain that there is someone out there who would benefit from your wisdom. And I would fucking love for you to fill out the guest application and join me on this mission to make the world a more loving place. So, I invite you to travel back in time with me, and we're going to see what current me thinks of almost 7 years ago me. Here we go. Hello, lovely humans. You're listening to Sex Stories, a podcast where I ask people to share their most intimate stories about sex. Now, this episode is going to be a little different from most of them because it's just me. So I'm actually going to start off by answering all of the questions briefly that I might ask guests. And before I do that, I want to talk a little bit about why I'm doing this podcast. I'm a really open person, and people just in life tend to share really personal stuff with me. Maybe because I do it first. Maybe I'm an oversharer. It's possible. But I think there's a real power in those stories. I know that when I hear other people tell me stories, I use that in my personal life, and then that is how I grow. And I also just find myself wishing that I had had more information when I first started having sex. I just didn't have that many friends who were doing it, or if they did, they were too shy to talk about it. My roommate in college literally gave me a book called Hot Sex, How to Do It, because I was so curious. I was asking her so many questions when I was 18 and I hadn't had sex yet because I kept getting rejected. And she was too shy to talk about it, so she gave me a book instead. So I want to shift that in our culture. I want to shift that conversation on a larger scale because I do believe that it's an important step to just talk about it, to get less scared talking about it, so that then we're less scared when the scary stuff happens. So that's my little intro. That's what I'm doing here. It's not supposed to be gross. It's not, it might be a turn on. I don't know. I mean, yeah, I don't know. It's not specifically supposed to be a turn on, but I'm going to start off by just telling you all of my own details, and let me know what you think. And let me know if you have any questions that I should be asking that I haven't thought of yet. Okay, so first, eventually I would read some Brené Brown book. I can't remember if it was Atlas of the Heart or one of her earlier ones that talked about oversharing, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm bad and wrong. Isn't it interesting? Me listening to Brené Brown induced shame I didn't have before about being bad and wrong because I was an overshare. And don't get me wrong, I love Brené Brown, but that is the first thing that stood out to me as funny. And I guess the other part that is very funny to me is that some little part of past me knew that there might be some people that are turned on by this sort of discussion, but it really wasn't what I was thinking of. It still is very funny to me that the tone of my podcast, which is not particularly salacious in any way, shape, or form, has been denied mainstream advertising, even though some other shows that are much, 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 much larger have really made a lot of money off of what I consider to be sexually gratuitous or like salacious. But that's okay. Part of what I've learned is that life is not fair. Okay, let's continue. So I'm just going to go through my list of questions that I'm going to be using to inspire guests and give you my own personal answers. So I am a 29-year-old female. Okay, I am currently a 35-year-old female. I identify as pansexual, which just means you like men, women, and everyone in between. It means I don't personally attach my attraction to, I just fall in love with people or just fall into attraction with people based on a feeling. Like half the time I don't even know what they actually look like. Like someone will be like, he's so hot. And I'll be like,
you're right, he is. Or like, that's your boyfriend is something I've experienced in the past. Ooh, should I say that? I don't know. He's not going to listen.
I do still identify as pansexual. I am more likely now to introduce myself as bisexual since I learned that bisexuality does include everyone. I think at the time I had just read something on pansexuality that was like, oh, it's more inclusive. And now that I know more about the specific labels and kind of what's behind all of them, it sort of depends on who you're talking to. And so truly, I have started saying that I am kind sexual because that is the truth. Because kindness and how I am actually being treated and the actual connection that I have with a person is more important to me than anything. I don't identify fully as demisexual, although other people have tried to gift me that label. Other people have also tried to tell me that I am non-binary. I don't need to like be super in love or connected with someone, but I need to be a little bit connected to want to have sex. Maybe kind sexual with a dash of relevant sexual. Like I need a good reason, whether it's an adventure and a mutual investment, some sort of mutual agreement, trying something for the first time, doing something on camera. There's got to be a good reason for me to spend my time and energy with another human being in that deeply personal way. Because the energy that I let into my sphere affects me deeply. I'm a sensitive creature.
I grew up on an orange ranch in California, so it's a conservative place. It's a medium-sized city of, I think it's now up to 125,000. We had a large Catholic population and a ton of pregnant teenagers. I think when I was there, it was one of the highest teen pregnancy rates in California. We didn't have great sex ed. And my parents, I went to church sometimes. We weren't super religious. We were generally religious. I never had like a promise ring or anything like that. I didn't go to church when I was old enough to choose not to go to church. I didn't really go, but we did holidays and stuff. So wasn't raised saying my prayers every night, but was raised to be vaguely Methodist.
Yep, those formative details have not changed very much. I was joking about time travel. I do not actually know how to do it yet.
I am an actor, writer, director, podcaster. I produce an astrology podcast also because I've been in Los Angeles for 11 years now. And I'm also a photographer and a painter. So I like to do all the creative things. So I have a pool of people that I'm surrounded with that tend to be more open and sexually free than maybe a lot of my friends back home. And that's another reason why I'm curious to start this podcast, because I want to get them on, but I also want to get people that maybe don't want to talk about sex as much here.
So I no longer produce the astrology podcast. I still am a photographer and all of those other things. However, we have added official bona fide self-identified sex worker to the mix there, OnlyFans, etc. If you know, you know. If you've followed me all the way down my rabbit hole, you know all the places you can find me. I also do in-person creative sessions, which can be just talking. Sometimes it's like relational counseling. Sometimes that happens virtually. I dabble in coaching. I don't really like to identify as a coach. I think there's plenty of coaches out there, and I do not really feel patient enough to truly be like a coach, and I don't like to do weekly sessions. So I'll do more one-off coaching sessions. All of that is on my website if you want to find me. If you can't find it, maybe it's because I turned it off, or you can just email me and request stuff. But I love in-person work the most. It is my favorite to work with someone in person. And I will say, while I still sometimes take pictures of actors and do headshots and just regular portraits, especially if it's a repeat client, I will rarely take on a new regular portrait client. A lot of the work that I do as a photographer is some form of naked, erotic, and or at least implied naughty. So I'm a big fan of boudoir. I love helping people bare themselves in front of the camera for the first time if they are just exploring that for themselves. And I love supporting other sex workers in a safe environment where they definitely are going to get a fuck ton of good shots really, really fast. And a lot of that often will include video clips as well, usually on mobile. Sometimes I will be handed a proper real camera, and I think more filmmaking is in my future again, but I love off-the-cuff stuff. I love it when couples want me to capture the two of them together erotically on camera. So that's a lot of the creative work that I do outside of this podcast, outside of sex work.
Now my next question is age I discovered masturbation. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure I was 10. And I read about it in a book called Asking Questions About Sex and Growing Up. I'm pretty sure, like, if I'm making that up, if there's nothing about masturbation in that book, then that is the belief that's in my head. And yeah, I started touching myself when I was pretty young, and definitely discovered the shower head when I was in my maybe early teens. I don't know. And I did not have sex with another person until I was 19. And that was not for lack of trying. I was rejected 3 times by 2 different dudes.
Okay, so I was actually rejected 4 times by 3 different dudes. I don't know if I forgot to count one or if I was too shy to say a bigger number, but there were 2 distinct guys who I met in college, and I approached both of them, and they ended up being the second and third person that I fucked. Okay, so respectively, those 2 dudes. And then the first one to reject me actually rejected me twice. So my freshman year, I tried to lose my virginity to him sometime around, I think, Halloween. And then the other time was around Easter when I was home for Easter. And I remember both times we were about to do it. It was just the tip was right there. And then he changed his mind, which I will say, everyone is always allowed to change their mind. That's okay. It was frustrating, and it was particularly confusing as a young woman who was taught that any dude who has red blood running in his veins, that I would like to have sex, and they're an immediate yes. And after talking to hundreds and hundreds of people, many of them gentlemen, I know that's not the case, right? But that is kind of the overarching cultural narrative that I was steeped in. So especially in my younger years, I really thought there was something wrong with me.
And at the time, I considered myself heterosexual, or I just really hadn't thought about it. I was I don't know. What would you even do with a girl? I was one of those, I really was ignorant. I just didn't know. So my relationship with sex has changed a lot since then. But I'm going to start with my earliest memories and feelings around sex, blowjobs, cunnilingus. So when I was really little, I remember learning what sex was for the first time when I was about 4 years old. My mom is a nurse, and she taught labor and delivery when I was growing up. So I knew from a scientific level that sex was a penis going into a vagina. But it seemed so implausible to me. I thought I must have heard wrong. When I remember being a very small child, and I remember making Barbie's scissor, and I was just I don't think I heard it right. That doesn't make sense. How could that fit? I was 16 when I learned about blowjobs, and that was from a Swedish exchange student who was staying with us. And I was so curious because she had had sex when she was 15. And so I was tell me everything. And again, I didn't get a ton of details. She was pretty yeah, well, what do you want to know? Yeah, well, you just do it. That's all there is. Yeah, I had a boyfriend. Very matter of fact. And I was just but then what? And I do remember pre-YouTube, looking up on the internet, a blowjob how-to video, because I was just looking for tips. I think I gave my first blowjob when I was 16 or 17 to my secret hookup buddy in high school. He was a year older than I was and very popular. And I was a slightly nerdy girl. Not that nerdy, but just I just was really independent, and I got along with people, but I was always doing my own thing. And he was my secret hookup buddy, and I'd sneak out to go see him, and I got to practice blowjobs on him. Lucky boy. Cunnilingus. Yeah, I was, I think the first time a dude went down on me, I was 17. I was very drunk. It was very exciting. It was a boy I'd had a crush on since I was very, very young, and I just thought he was so cute and so sweet, and I had no idea what was happening. I had heard about it. I knew what it was. I knew boys were supposed to pleasure girls. I didn't let my secret hookup buddy pleasure me because I was it's too special. Back then, I was really looking for the right candidate to lose my virginity to when I was old enough. I do remember also being very, very young and thinking, gosh, I can't wait until I'm 20 and get married so I can have sex. It wasn't that anyone had ever specifically instructed me to wait until marriage. The closest thing I got to a sex talk was my mom saying something about, don't let a boy pressure you into sex if he says he loves you. And that never happened. She just never told me what to do if I wanted to have sex on my own. So that was the closest thing I got to a sex talk, which is my next question. And I don't remember anything besides that. Oh, I guess my mom did give me that book. And there was another book called Show Me. Actually, I'm going to Google it right now because I feel like it was German or something. I remember a book called Show Me. It was a big black hardbound book. And I think after they gave it to us, we took it from me and my older brother, or maybe it was just me, we took it into the guest house bedroom where we hid it under the bed, and we would take it out and show our friends. And that was I guess the closest thing to to porn that I experienced.
Okay, so I actually since then have taken Show Me, and it's now sitting, actually, I'll go grab it. Hold on a second. Okay, so this is the book that I was talking about. I will not show you pictures because I will get in big, big internet trouble. But I will read to you the introduction from it because in this moment, I'm like, holy shit, is this why I am now on an edgerotic mission that I have the sense I stumbled into, but actually, did this plant the seed? I wonder if these people are still alive. So, show me a picture book of sex for children and parents. Photography, captions, design, Will McBride. Explanatory text, Dr. Helga Fleischhauer-Hardt. English language adaptation, Hilary Davies. English language edition, 1975 by St. Martin's Press, 175 Fifth Avenue, New York. So, German edition, 1974 by Jugenddienst Verlag, Wuppertal, composed, printed, and bound in the United States, Library of Congress, catalog number 7430507. This is the title page that I can show you because there are nude images of children. It is not pornographic. So this book is, I think maybe this is why I'm so fucking confused. Why every single, oh gosh, I probably shouldn't even say nude pictures of, okay. Well, I will edit myself, so I might have to bleep that. But I think this might be why I'm like, of course being naked and even sexual doesn't mean erotic or gratuitous for gratification. What? And how are we supposed to see what it looks like and be educated about what it looks like if we don't have a safe place to get these images from? If porn is our only option. Okay, so this is the part I can't show you. It says, "Oh, come on, show me. We have made this book for children and parents. In their hands, it could be an aid to sexual enlightenment. But above all, we hope it'll show parents that natural sexuality develops only when children are surrounded from birth onwards by a loving family and environment which does not repress sexuality. We don't believe a child will have found the answer to sex simply by looking at the pictures in this book. A good understanding requires, rather, a continuing exchange between parent and child, a dialogue which helps the child express his questions, or her questions, and problems concerning sex and resolve them. The photographic part of this book is meant as a taking-off point for parents. Internal bodily processes such as conception, pregnancy, as well as anatomical facts should be presented to the child in simple words by the parents themselves. The text at the end of this book makes suggestions for this purpose. It gives parents basic information on the development of sexuality and sex education. We are of the opinion that only an explicit and realistic presentation of sex can spare children fear and guilt feelings related to sexuality. For this reason, we chose photography as a medium. With much care and under great difficulty, we succeeded in photographing the children in such a way that their natural behavior came through. We thank the children and their parents for their help in putting together the photographs. The captions to the pictures are gathered from their spontaneous comments. We hope the book will serve parents and children as a source of information and guide them toward a happy sexuality marked by love, tenderness, and responsibility. Helga Fleischhauer-Hardt, Will McBride." Whoa. Okay, so I will say, little kid me never read all of the words at the end of this book. There is so many words at the end of this book that I, even as an adult, never read the explanatory text. Wow, well, I'm going to. I am layers of shocked in this particular moment. And now I'm like, who are they? Where are they? Are they still around? What are they doing? What do they think of their work now? What else have they worked on? I gotta go look them up. Okay, so to be continued.
I remember in sex ed, I felt very proud. I'm remembering back to like 4th grade. The first sex ed I got was wrapped up with them teaching us about AIDS. And I remember feeling very proud that I already knew what a condom was. And I don't remember where I learned about a condom, but I remember this like feeling of pride of like, oh, I already know some of this. I remember a bad video in 5th grade where they showed ovaries with pancakes, like the shape of them. I don't know why they made us watch that. I remember boys and girls had to be separated. I remember sex ed being a lot about your period, about getting your period. Don't remember anything in high school. But that is because I didn't take health with everybody else. I wanted to take way too many classes, so I did a study abroad through a Christian high school. So that's probably why I didn't get anything in high school. And growing up, I was just really shy about sex, and I had a hard time talking about it. I knew when I finally did lose my virginity, I was so excited and felt so proud, and I did not know how to talk to my sexual partners. They were men, the first dozen or so were men. And I just thought that when I got a boyfriend, that's when I would figure out how to have an orgasm with a partner. I was a little bit too nervous and was probably actually very orgasm shy. But then when I eventually did get a boyfriend, it wasn't that much easier. And I didn't know how to communicate about it. And he was sensitive and I was not very good at talking about sensitive things because I would just want him to read my mind. And then I would get mad and we'd get in fights. And then I was like, I'm never going to have an orgasm with a partner. And I just sort of was like, oh, maybe I'm one of those women that's just shaped a certain way so they don't get orgasms. Because that was something I had read about. This many women can never have an orgasm with a partner. And so I was just like, oh, maybe that's me. And I have since learned that that is not true. I just need to be in a good mental, emotional, and physical space and have a partner who wants me to have an orgasm, but isn't asking me every 5 seconds if I've come yet. So there's a big difference in my mind, at least for my body.
I am having so much compassion for past me that probably read the statistic that only about 30% of pussy owners come on a cock without specific clitoral stimulation, but that doesn't mean you cannot come with a partner. And so hearing like the certainty in my young voice, not that much younger, but but hearing even in the voice of 28-year-old me, the concept that there are types of women, and I'm saying this with air quotes, that cannot come with a partner. I mean, certainly that is true for those of us who have experienced some kind of trauma that gets in the way, right? And I mean capital T trauma as well as lowercase t trauma. I think looking back, my quote unquote inability to communicate was just based on the fact that I was never really taught emotional communication. I was never really taught explicitly how to gently communicate. I had to spend the last 6 years of my life deeply researching this topic on my own. Emotions, communication, and sex have become my hyper-focused topics, and they're my favorite topics. And that's why I love to connect through words and noodling. But damn, looking back on past me really allows me to see how far I've come and how much I've come. And also there is so much more to come. And so much more coming to come. And so much more coming to come.
Let's see. Okay, so now I'm into the section where I want to ask people what gets them off. The more specific, the better. Oh, I'm feeling shy. Well, I can't believe I'm going to ask people these questions. I've already recorded 9 episodes at this point, and I was like, okay, well, I guess I should go ahead and do my own thing. It seems easier when you're talking to other people, though.
Even current me of today agrees that it is still much easier to speak in general with other people about what is delicious, what are turn-ons, what are kinks. Now I have no problem sharing comfortably all by myself. I can talk about my sexual favorite things non-stop if I feel like I have permission. And I wonder if I was still struggling with permission or if it just felt, that's interesting. Okay, so here we go.
So, kinks. I discovered in April 2017 that I'm super into BDSM. I identify as a submissive, and I kind of stumbled into it. No, that's wrong. I didn't stumble. I sought it out. I was with a girlfriend who is an off-again, on-again lover. Like, we're friends. We also are sometimes lovers. And I was like, I've always wanted to be tied up. And then, like, she played around with a tie with me, and it was, like, fun for a second. But I was like, what is this? What if I do, like, the whole formal thing? And so I went on the internet and joined FetLife.
It was not FetLife. It was a sugar daddy website. And I was not explicitly seeking out kink. I didn't know what FetLife was, but I had set the intention that I was going to figure out how to explore being tied up and all that that implied. So I was looking for kink without knowing that I was looking for kink, and I happened to stumble into someone who later would do super cool things like brag to another girl he was going on dates with that he was my lover that I had mentioned on podcast when he discovered she was a fan of the podcast. And I found out through another friend that he was advertising himself on that same website with images of me. like total lack of consent, or rather it was one-way consent, because I had lots of explicit conversations where we agreed to keep certain things private, and those boundaries were just not respected, and I did not find out till many years later. So I still get messages from people who are early on in my podcast journey when I talk about him in present tense, and now I'm like former dominant, first dominant, long time ago learning experience, and oh, this is the part that I was like, ooh, I don't know, tender. She didn't know what she didn't know. And I know that many of us who have stumbled into kink explorations have early experiences that are big learning experiences, because we do not know what we don't know until we know it. I didn't know that a good dominant who is with a brand new baby partner who is curious about kink but knows nothing should really encourage that partner should really assign the submissive partner homework of doing research on their own outside of the relationship. Because in a power dynamic that is in a silo, which is to say outside of community, and the submissive partner who is brand new and knows nothing is completely relying upon the care and nurturance of the one in charge, it is actually impossible for the submissive to be really in charge, which is supposed to be the main point of all power exchange relationships. The submissive is always in control. A safe word is a good start. But it is not everything. Knowledge, information, is power. So that is why I am obsessed with pleasure education on a number of levels.
And I was like, just talk to the first dude who was not creepy. And I ended up meeting him for coffee, and he became my master, and we hit it off from there. So I did not know what I was getting into, truly. And I do feel like I've been lucky in so many ways, because it's not that I've been making the smartest decisions my entire sexual life. I just have been really, really lucky. I've never been attacked. Maybe I have a good intuition. I don't know if I can take credit for it, but I have jumped into some situations where I'm like, wow, yay for being alive still. So with this guy, I met him at a coffee shop. He seemed good. And I was like, okay, tomorrow night, yes, I will meet you in a hotel room. I will get strapped to a bed, and I will do a ton of kinky things with you. And that included anal sex the first night. And I'd had it before, but I was never that into it. I was like, I actually had it the night I lost my virginity, because I was so curious. I was like, yeah, let's try everything. And when he brought it up with me, I was like, I don't know. I don't know. And he was like, well, what don't you know about it? And I was like, well, it's not very comfortable, and I'm just nervous that something would happen, and I'd be embarrassed. And he's like, what? Like what? Like, what do you mean? And I was like, I don't know. What if it gets messy? You hear the messy stories. And he was like, okay, so what if it gets messy? And I said, well, then I would be embarrassed. And he was like, well, what if you never had to be embarrassed around me? And that seems so obvious, but it was a revelation to me at the time that the person I'm fucking, I shouldn't be embarrassed in front of. And that kind of has opened up my whole world sexually, and it's made me appreciate my body more. And I just tell everyone, because again, it seems so obvious, but I didn't know. And I'm not a dumb person. I'm not an inexperienced person, but I just hadn't clicked in my brain in that way. And I still realized in that moment, for as sex positive as and open-minded as I thought I was still carrying a ton of cultural shame with me at the time. So that was a big deal for me. Because of my adventure into the land of kink, I have gotten so much more explicit around conversations about sex ahead of time with partners, to the point where I've actually turned guys off. And just to clarify, like I'm saying guys, because it's easier for me to just like stumble upon dudes who want to go out. I'm a lot more shy when it comes to women. I don't know how to ask them out. I'm still in the awkward phase of like, oh my gosh, are my girlfriends going to think I'm hitting on them because I like ladies? I'm like not on dating apps because it seems too overwhelming. So most of my dating experiences are with men, although some of my most significant ones are with female-bodied humans. So just to clarify, I did have an experience earlier this year where a guy invited himself over to my house. Now I do live in a loft, and I do paint there, and I do shoot photos there. But he invited himself over to my studio, as he said, for a second date when I'd been pitching like lunch or hanging out in the park with his dog. And so I was like, oh, if you want to come over to my house, I didn't think we were having a sexual conversation, but we can talk about that. And he got so offended. He's like, well, I can't believe you would assume that. And I was like, oh, well, then why, like literally why else would you want to come over to my house for a second date? I was like, I got really like datey vibes from you, but if you want to just like skip straight to fucking, like that's just a different conversation. So my foray into kink has made me a much more straightforward. I also just got to the point where I'm like, oh, I can ask for clarity if I want it. And I like love just utter clarity with people because I've spent so much of my life being so confused that now I'm like, oh, I can ask for it. And it's like really refreshing that when someone freaks out, if I ask just to clarify what they mean, then I don't need them in my life. So that's been my journey in communication, from very confusing, guessing, sort of like hoping and waiting communication to like a very direct style, which I just love knowing. That's what I love about BDSM. I love the absolute clarity about everything.
Wow, it is so interesting to hear these reflections. So yes, the conversation from the first night with my first dominant partner definitely was revelatory for me. And also I think maybe it was so meaningful that I gave him more credit for making me feel safe than maybe he deserved. Looking, in retrospect, hindsight is 2020. I don't know that it's really 2020, but hindsight sure does come with a lot of other understandings. Part of what I'm also picking up on here is I am very fortunate that I have not been attacked or abused, certainly harassed. I certainly have been harassed, and my response to rude harassment is usually a big boundary throwdown, which even in those situations where I'm like, oh yes, and I learned to be extra explicit about communication, well, what I always was pretty good about, which I didn't realize or pinpoint until much later on, was this kind of assumption that actions and words should match. So while the story that I made out of a lot of my early experiences was there's something wrong with me and people reject me and I explode them and they get mad at me a lot in ways that other people don't seem to have people get mad at them as much, what I now realize was happening was I was basically blank, excuse me, new to me human, your actions do not match your words. What is happening here? Because I thought it was this, but now it sounds like it's this. So what do you think? And that was me accidentally exploding boundary pushers, like not even being conscious of enforcing a boundary. I was just looking for clarity in so many of my early experiences. And that seeking of clarity continues to blow up in my face sometimes. And I'm learning that there is a certain type of human, a lot of types of humans who prefer to like live in the gray area so that after the fact they can be like, nuh-uh, it was whatever I say it was, And so I've noticed that there's some moments where I really try to like pinpoint someone because I think that I will connect with them better when I deeply understand exactly what they're saying. And I'm confused so often because I have this literal brain, so looking back, I'm like, oh, I have compassion for past me who just didn't know what she didn't know. Okay, continuing.
Okay, first times, kissing, sex, blowjobs. I think I kind of covered those. I don't remember. My first kiss, I was under the moon. It's not that sexy. It was very full of tongue. I just remember being like, wow, it was a lot of slobber. And I guess it just hadn't really occurred to me like what a makeout kiss was like, or I thought it was like something you worked up to, or I don't know. I just didn't know. I love blowjobs. So my current thoughts on blowjobs are I love them. I did not start out this way. Interestingly enough, initially when I started giving blowjobs to my secret hookup buddy in high school, I did not identify it as a sexual act. It wasn't actually until my Swedish friend, who told me about sex things, and I was like, oh, it's a sexual thing. She's like, yeah, that's why they call it oral sex. And I was like, that's ridiculous. So in a very funny way, I just sort of like didn't have this, I don't know. I was just sort of like, yeah, that's a thing I've done. That's whatever. And I wish I could go back in time and be like, what were those early blowjobs like? But, I never really liked them until I got into kink. It wasn't until last year with my mask that they went from something that I like enjoyed doing for a person that I cared about, like for that person, to like, this is like my thing and I get to enjoy the actual sensation. And I think part of what has flipped that for me is I now know how to deep throat and I just really enjoy it. I also really got in touch with my sensual, I want to say skin to skin side. What I'm trying to say is I started enjoying my body more in the last 2 years, mainly because of paying attention to my body. And that's I had a whole thing where I went away to South America for 6 months and I was taking naked pictures of myself just for me. And like only now in the last 6 months that it's the end of 2018 have I started posting them and sharing them. And it all sort of feels related to this sex podcast, but it's all a little bit different too. And so it was when I don't know, learned to deep throat and then got really proud of it. And then just like, I love the like sensations. So I really, really love intense sensations, but I really don't love tickling. And which like, I'm mentioning that because for some people it is a kink.
Okay, so I do sometimes now like tickling. I have learned that if I expect the tickling, if the person has a kink or fetish for it, if they clearly communicate their desire and a frame around it, yes, I love tickling. I fucking love it. I don't like surprise tickling. I don't like tickling when I say stop in a space where we haven't established a container or a safe word, or if I use a safe word and that is ignored. Obviously, I don't like boundary pushing tickling. How funny. I'm turned off by boundary pushers. And as for blowjobs, I would have to say I like blowjobs even more now. I have gotten even better at them, even more confident. I am pretty masterful, or shall I say mistressful, at deep throating. Because for a while I was like, I mean, it still does depend on the cock. Like, it depends on the angle, the shape, the size. It's not like, oh, if you're too big, I can't get you down my throat. I have not. I've had a lot of experience since then. Don't get me wrong. There are some that fit if and only if I find the right angle. I now know which angles to do for which types of curves, but also some have such subtle curves that I really have to like. I love when I have time to like rotate around like a clock and find the spot. And I just take so much great pleasure out of it, and when I have a partner who I love the smell of, I love to include ball play and like having my mouth like slobber up and down there. And just like, I recently had a partner where I was really helping them discover the sensations of pleasure in their balls for the first time. So that's very gratifying. And I have learned to embody and enjoy my body at a whole new level. And I'm curious to see how that will continue to evolve as I continue to grow.
And I really don't like being mildly uncomfortable. So like you can beat me. I really love being choked with consent discussed beforehand.
And I do love impact play and I do love physical play, but because of the sheer number of 100% male partners that have gone for the choke without a consent talk, without asking, just with assumption, now if I'm with a new partner ahead of time, especially if it's someone who is like identifies as vanilla and is brand new to talking about stuff, because I love vanilla sex. It is the foundation of all kinky things. Vanilla is a delicious flavor. It is one of my very favorite sensual experiences. I need that to get to know someone now. No longer will I jump straight into doing all the things. I do like it if people get to know me, especially if we're gonna have some kink. But now, as part of my little speech, I guess, before I get to know someone, I will say things like, and I do like to be touched. You can touch me all over, depending on their hands, whether they're cuts or anything. I will tell them if they can touch near my pussy, if they can touch in my pussy, if we need to put gloves on to play safely, if they have open cuts on their fingers, etc. And that's when I'll usually be like, and if you think you might want to spank me today, let me know, and I will give you a little spanking tutorial about how I like it. Because also the people who spank without asking usually don't necessarily know the safe ways to do it, and I don't need to have any burst kidneys personally. And in that same breath, I'll be like, and as we're getting to know each other, I do love to have, a firm hand on the back of my neck with slow, gentle squeezing as we're building trust. I don't like fast movements to come near my face. You can slide your fingertips up through my scalp, through my hair. You can squeeze a little bit. No yanking, no pulling. I like gentleness as we're getting to know each other. And if we want to add intensity, we can. And we're just going to keep hands away from my very fragile trachea. We're not going to cut off any blood supply today. If we get to the point today where I want to have your hand on the front side of my neck, I will show you how to do that safely. And the whole point, again, for anyone listening is let your partner know if you do know how to do it safely. And the basic tutorial is slide up. The pressure goes beneath the jawline to create that sensation, not against cutting off blood flow arteries, not crushing windpipes, nothing like that. And I personally, because I am Mrs. Health and Safety, I know because many of you tell me that you are into getting to the edge of passing out, and I just can say I have heard some fatal stories that have resulted from that. So I would like all of you to stay alive on this planet to experience as much pleasure as your human bodies can possibly create and co-create in this lifetime. So just please always take breath play, which includes choking, very seriously.
Yeah, and so I love blowjobs. So I'm like, I don't know, great at them. And it's like fun to get good feedback. And I also have gotten better at communicating with people that I'm with about like, what do you like? Like if it's a man, I'm like, how sensitive are your balls? Like, what do you have a favorite thing? Let me show you what I'm into. And then you give me like, tell me if you have a favorite thing that I haven't gotten to. And what I found is most of the time people sort of like to be generally surprised. I'm a lot less confident with going down on a woman because I'm just like, is my tongue strong enough? Am I doing the right thing? I know that my vagina is really sensitive depending on the day.
I am much more confident at pleasuring pussies these days. Although I imagine that when I have a long-term pussy-owning partner, I will similarly look back at this current me and be like, oh, she didn't know how much better she could get. But lesbian lessons, I think, coming in 2025. I've talked to a lot of my lady friends about this who are more experienced femme lovers than I, and they seem on board. So I'm gonna get even better. We're only getting better.
And so that was more alarming to me before I was as proficient in communicating, because I used to just be so shy and so scared, and I literally could not find the words to communicate around sex because I had no examples. And now I feel like if I were to find a lady that I wanted to spend a lovely time with in a naked way, I would probably be like, how does this feel? What do you want, fingers as well? Like, where do you want stuff to go? And I will say that I'm becoming better at articulating that for myself and sharing it with my lovers in real time. Like my clitoris on some days is like extremely sensitive. So you cannot like lightly brush a fingertip over it, like to start with, like that will sometimes cause me pain. But for me to actually have an orgasm, eventually it's got to be like, I don't know, I guess pushed, rubbed, like hit pretty hard. So like I do like really vigorous sex eventually. But if it's like rubbing in the wrong way, then sometimes I'm like in a very painful situation. And so then I need some like skin folds to cover up the super sensitive part. But it like depends so much on the day is what I'm discovering. So those are my butt stuff. Yeah, I love it now. I didn't when I first started. And it took me months to warm up to it, but I like the dirtiness of it. I like I don't know. I've had askasms now, and I thought they were a myth, and now I have had them, and they don't happen every time. And some days butt sex is still like uncomfortable to the point where I have to say, okay, mercy, let's stop for today, or like I beg a reset kind of thing, because I did get into it with my master, and I don't know, the stuff that people said that was so scary, it's not that scary. Like your butthole's not going to break apart. Like it's not, or I mean, if it has, I don't know. I've been having it pretty regularly for a year and a half, a little more. Yeah. So I'm all for it. I also like putting a finger up a dude's butt, like particularly if he's inside me. I think that's super hot. I haven't actually gotten to play with a lady asshole.
I have now gotten to play with a lady asshole, and it was so fucking hot. Like, I mean, I think I've played with a few, but there is one in particular that it was like, it was the hottest threesome of three-way butt sluts, and it continues to reverberate throughout my mind. And if you ever listen to this, you two know who you are.
So that's something, I guess, on my bucket list. I mean, not that I like, there's some people that are like fascinated by buttholes. For me, it's sort of like I'm happy to be played with in so many ways. And I think that for me right now, that would start out as although I'm thinking like, yeah, if she had a strap on, I would definitely like that.
The session that I'm thinking of that was not solely anal focus, but definitely included anal focus on both of us pussy owners, also included both of us wearing strap-ons, and it was, without giving away the details, because now is not the time. Damn, it was hot.
So, okay, maybe it is a bucket list. Or something to possibly look forward to in a curious but non-attached way. There we go. I think my biggest sexual turnoff is just someone who's not paying attention. Like, I feel like that hits all the main bases. Like, if they don't listen to my words, if they physically are not attuned to my body, and then if they also just like ignore stuff when I explicitly state it out loud. But I also get turned off by stuff like stupidity but I don't know, not even stupidity, because I feel like it falls into the category of people just not paying attention. So that's probably just my number one thing. I don't know. Obviously, if someone is like, I don't know, I'm trying to think, like, it's not like I've slept with people that are older, significantly older than I am.
LOL, at the time I thought a couple decades was significantly older than I am. I have now slept with someone who is over 5 decades older than I am, and it was one of the hottest sessions I've ever had. Like, I've seen this lover a few times. We just have such a good, sweet connection. He is like my icon in my head that encourages me to do like my bare minimum 30-minute, 4 to 6 days a week vigorous exercise, because he is in such good shape. He can get up and down off the ground. Like, he's an inspiration, and we have explored some really hot stuff together. So people of all ages, provided we have an overlap and you are the right level of kind, yes, please.
I guess I've never slept with someone who was like really dirty. Like, not that they have to shower right before they come to me, but I've never been with somebody where I was like, you need to shower before we get together.
I definitely have had experiences with lovers that were like, daddy's gonna come home sweaty from the gym and you're gonna lick his balls and like it. And I was like, I'll try that. And I did. Like, when I'm with someone whose animal body smells I actually like, we've got the pheromones, we've got the connection, it's hot. Do I think it's more hot and respectful to be treated like a goddess and have someone wash and bathe and prepare themselves for me? Yes. If I have a pre-negotiated dynamic with someone where we are exploring consensual degradation, that was fun. That was fun that one time. He also smelled good to me sweaty. I have one lover right now who, like, I can see him in any form, but his basic hygiene levels and the food that he eats and the extra, like, that all makes a difference, right? So I have had lovers who were displaying signs of yeast who I've had to turn away because I value my own health and safety, and I am big on mutual genital inspections before playing. So I will say that.
That I can recall. I'm trying to think if I've ever like been in a mud run with somebody that I was going to have sex with later, but I don't know. Yeah, I feel it's mostly for me not paying attention.
Okay, my biggest turnoff that is absolutely missing from this list is entitlement. When someone feels entitled to my time or my energy or my sexuality or my attraction, when they think that like they exist and so they should Instagram message me to just pick me up and hit me up without an irresistible invitation, without a good reason, without an adventure, without really any indication that they have a clear understanding of who I as a human being actually am, I find that dehumanizing, rude, like rudeness, opposite of kind sexual, right? Rudeness is the opposite of kindness, so that is definitely my turnoff as a kind sexual. But entitlement is the thing that makes me really want to, honestly, it puts me in righteousness mode, maybe a little self-righteous mode, where I'm just like, why would you treat any human being out there with anything but love, kindness, and respect? To me, entitlement is disrespectful, and there is nothing that'll get me turned off faster than someone who just feels like I owe them something when they have not even taken the time to introduce themselves, or who is making a point of using a fake name, making it really obvious that they're using a fake name, especially when they don't even know anything about the sex work that I do, and they think they're like getting off on some secret relationship with a podcaster. I'm like, get a fucking life. And like, and compassion-hearted me knows that that is a sign of someone who maybe has not received the type of love that I have, who is maybe hurting in a way where they feel powerless, and so they want to kind of just feel power over another human being. I also know that there are lots of influencers out there who are sort of saying things like, to be a real man, you just got to take charge and do this, and they are totally missing the fact that true, powerful masculinity includes deeply being in touch with one's emotions. Because if you cannot be in touch with the full range of your emotions, they will rule you. What does Jung say? Until the unconscious is made conscious, it will rule you and you will call it fate, something like that. I'm probably misquoting, but like, know thyself, that's hot. Entitlement means there's probably some unconscious stuff going on, and it's a little bit rude, and I'm just like not that patient, not really here for it.
I have been with a person of the same sex. I have been with multiple partners at the same time. I've had a couple of threesomes.
I've had way more threesomes now. I love threesomes. However, I still have not had a threesome with 2 live cocks. yet. I came so close with a lover a few years ago. He was going through a divorce, but then I was such a good influence. They got back together. And so he was the one who was open to it. He's like, I got a friend. And then, nope. So that one is still coming soon.
Most of them have been one woman and one man. Most of them, or a female-bodied person and a male. Most of them have been, not as like many, like it's like, I don't know, less than 10. I'd have to stop and count. I did have one that was, we didn't have penetrative sex, but I did have 2 dudes give me a massage all the way. Like it started out as me just being, yes, massage, yes to this, yes to this. Yes to yoni massage. Does that mean an orgasm? Sure. Penetration? No thanks, not feeling it today. And that was like a really delicious, it was a delicious evening. What else? Best, worst, weirdest sex blowjobs. Ugh, I feel like this is just going to have to come out over the course of the podcast. I am going to let each guest ask me a question at the end of every episode. So I don't know. I hope it doesn't get too redundant.
I have changed that part of the podcast. It felt like I was putting people on the spot, and I've realized that the people who are the same level of curious as I am usually just ask me questions back and forth throughout the pod. And if that is not their personality, that's okay. And the meanest thing I could do is be like, okay, your turn, be a host now. So I have retired that part of the podcast.
I feel the most in touch with my body when I'm well rested and when I'm well fed, not overly full, but like when my physical needs are just taken care of and I'm in a space where I can be comfortably naked, like I'm safe with whoever I'm with. It's not too hot. It's not too cold. It's just right. That I can just feel anything and I could get touches for days and days and days. I feel like I have an endless desire to be touched. And I think that is one of the things about my master that I have enjoyed so much is that he just seems to touch me as much as I want to be touched. And yeah, I guess I always did have this nervousness with previous partners of like, I just want so much more than I feel like I deserve to ask for. And for the first time, I feel like, oh no, I can just tell people that. And maybe someone doesn't want to touch me. Like maybe they're like, my hands are tired. I don't know. I haven't come across that yet, but I also haven't explored that many new partners since my master. So yeah, that's the end of that section.
I have had a couple of partners that want to touch me as much as he touched me, but not very many. It was really rare, and that was pretty special. So there are some days where I'm like, oh, did I peak? And then there's those like anal focused threesomes with 2 people who are totally on my wavelength, and I'm like, nope, we're still just getting started. And I hear my horniest years are ahead of me. But yes, still when I am most well-resourced and what I specifically didn't call out beyond food and sleep and hydration and exercise, well, now I have a regular exercise routine and I realize that has improved my sexuality. That has improved my ability to physically enjoy sex so much. Like if someone had just gone back to teenage me and been like, hey girl, hey, if you just do like a bare minimum amount of like cardio and weightlifting, like you're going to be really strong and be able to safely pick stuff up and reach stuff off shelves because you're taller than most people. And also you can fuck as long as you want. Like you can wear a cock and fuck your pussy owning partners as long as they need. Or you can strap and peg someone as long as they need, like either way. So that has been the biggest. But the other piece is I need to feel creatively fulfilled. I need to feel like my work tasks are complete. And I mean specifically my artwork tasks, art/work. Like, I think the irony of my existence is the reason I so far prefer to stay single is that I have not yet found a person who I feel like accurately understands the fullness of my being. I have had so many partners who appreciate the space I hold for them and my niceness and my hotness and my horniness and my desire to like fuck. And I feel like most of the time when I meet someone and they're like, oh my God, you're amazing, and they invite me into a deeper connection, it usually means that they would like to compete with my artwork instead of supporting it. They're like, well, no. Now, we're taking it to the next level. So like, stop working and pay attention to me and we'll just stare blankly at each other's eyeballs and we're not even going to be fucking. And I'm like, what? Like, no, no. Like, if someone is going to be in my personal space or even in my personal life at all, like, I do need them to be very sexual, and I do need the non-sexual time to probably be full of noodling, like thinking about the world and people and how to make the world a sexier, more loving place together. And they must be deeply engaged in my work, because if that to them is an afterthought, then they are not seeing the real me. And so I think the funny tragedy is that in my recent experiences, especially since starting this podcast, a lot of the people that I've tried to date, like, don't even want to listen to it. And I'm like, what am I doing? I need to filter differently. Or they like would never be a guest on this podcast. And I realized that recently, and I'm like, okay, so not that I want this podcast to necessarily be suddenly full of guests who simply have ulterior motives for being a guest on the show, because that I have encountered a couple of times, and those episodes didn't end up going to air because it was a sneaky motive. And so I guess that would be another turnoff, like, which is maybe a flavor of entitlement, because it's like, yeah, if I can't trust you, if you can't honestly say like, hey, I would be interested in getting to know you, and I like, could I be a guest on your podcast? Like, that would be hot if they were forthright about it. And I have invited a couple of people that I've been interested with as I try this new method to be a guest on the podcast, because I'm curious about them. And they've said yes, but they have not yet followed through, so we will see. But yeah, feeling creatively well-resourced and creatively supported by a partner at any level, right? Even if it's casual, like if it's a casual fuck, you can't just be like eating up time I would otherwise be spending on creating funds or interviewing people or doing my mission to make the world a sexier, more loving place. Like, if you're in competition for that, that's a turnoff.
I do talk about sex with partners ahead of time. I talk about protection ahead of time. I almost always have to be the one to bring it up.
I am still most likely to be the partner who brings up safer sex conversations and leads the safer sex practices. Part of that is because I have spent the last 6 years deeply researching sex and sexual health. And while I am not a certified sex educator, I've learned that I should stop fighting the fact that I am indeed educating people about sex. So I have made it my business, quite literally, to make sure that I am bringing safety to the table or the bedroom or the couch or wherever, the back seat of the car, wherever we're doing it. I bring safety. I am Mrs. Health and Safety, and I do tell people that kind of as a joke, but also as a serious, because I wish we were all Mrs. Health and Safety, regardless of gender. I just think it sounds fun to say, let's be Mrs. Health and Safety, and I imagine little spectacles, which I realize is probably not sexy to most of you. But you know what I've also realized? Silly is sexy, and that's a different topic. Okay, so the next little section, early me is ranting. Current me would not do this. Current me has learned that this is not an effective way to communicate. I do notice that early me in early podcasts, in an effort to agree with guests and feel approval, would like jump on judgment and rant trains. And it is interesting because as I have like let go of those old patterns that never really belonged to me, but really were part of me trying to like fit in with social norms, it has gotten socially bumpy. Like, I've been in so many situations where I'm like, I don't want to be judgment, but also this person is basically asking me to approve of them by agreeing with them, and it's in a judgment way, and I don't agree with that judgment, nor do I agree with the way all of that is being handled. So this like next little section where I'm like, guys, get your shit together. I mean, everyone needs to get their shit together. I'm still very messy in very many ways. And I don't think it's a very compassionate way to communicate my point, which I fear gets in the way of people hearing me. So I'll say it now before that little rant, and you can just ignore the rant or kind of like laugh at old me or etc. I do think protection is really important. I know I've had a lot of penis-owning partners who've been like, oh, it doesn't feel the same. I agree. Like, there is nothing hotter to me than skin-to-skin contact. But you know what you can do? You can put a condomless cock, between two torsos with a lot of lube and dirty talk about how, imagine you're raw inside of me and you're going to fill me up. You can fuck low down between thighs or legs that are like tightly squished together and fantasize that way. Like, if you are the type that is like, my cock cannot wear a condom, you could also explore the use of a female condom, which, yes, they are more expensive. Sometimes they are hard to come by. There was a point where my insurance covered it and now it doesn't. Like, I used to get free ones. But if you have a penis owning partner who like cannot be bothered to wrap it up, you could at least teach them how to use an internal condom, which they call female condoms. FC2 is the only one. I don't know if I had spoken to another brand that was like, has one in development. I don't know if this is on the market yet. So there is a limited amount of companies who manufacture them, but they are a great way for a cock to be free and a pussy to be protected, okay? However, in order to use them effectively, the cock needs to be all the way deep inside, and you got to make sure the big outer ring stays on the outside. So it does require both people to pay attention. I definitely have used them with people who had larger cocks who were not paying attention. I had to sort of like slow them down and stop them because they weren't helping be my warrior of safety. So I have invited every penis owning partner and pussy owning partner to help keep me safe when I'm like, okay, so we're using barriers today. I need you to help me make sure this stays on. You know, if it's just Laurel's and natural rubber latex panties, I'm like, okay, I'm going to hold this here. Or if I'm the one wearing them, I'm like, okay, just make sure that it stays covering all of my folds and cracks, because the point of safer sex is to mitigate risk, you know, and the only surefire way to not have any sexual risk is to be completely celibate. And, you know, in my opinion, I feel less connected when I can't physically get to know someone. I love the private, intimate space that fucking creates between two or more people. Like, I love that little container where we are free and safe to be comfortable in our full creative selves. You know, assuming that both partners are like willing to let down their guard and be open and communicate and connect. I love that. And so for me, it starts with safer sex. And so I do encourage penis owners to always wear condoms, to always carry them around. It's not presumptuous to carry around a condom. I do think it's presumptuous to forget about latex allergies, so I do like condom brands that are latex free, personally. I think that if two people are sex positive and respectfully engaging as adults, sex is hot, sex is fun. I think it's good to talk about what it means for both parties ahead of time. And what some of my partners who used to struggle with condom use have experienced is like, maybe they just need to find a different fit of condom. And our past sponsor, One Condoms, has a lot of options. You can go listen to the past episode with Mila about that, and I can point you to it if you can't find it. But if you type in One Condoms, you should be able to find it in our old episode titles. And the other thing is like, practice masturbating in a condom. You know, the people who I have been with who have the hardest time getting off are usually the people that think that sex is all about putting a penis in a vagina and getting off, which I will say is the most boring way to have sex. And if we slow down, if we partake in some masturbation, meditation, sensation, explorations of edging, we can resensitize ourselves. We can get to know our bodies. We can remember to use lube. We can let those calluses that sometimes show up on a cock heal themselves, you know, and find a new level of pleasure and safe ways to connect. So that's some of the wisdom that I've gained. And now here is my original rant.
Guys, because I've never had to bring it up with a lady.
True.
Gentlemen, get your shit together. It's very easy to have a condom with you. Do not expect to put your dick inside of anyone without a condom. Bring it up. Check in. Don't be an asshole. Don't wait for her. If you want to have sex, you've got to be a grown-up and talk about it.
I think also this like series of don't with a very condescending tone is a really good example of the issues that I have discovered with a lot of like common media discourse on sex related topics, because it's a lot of like, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. And not a good balance of like, hey, here are some things to consider. Hey, here are some norms and some ways that, you know, and sex educators are doing it. I am not by any means the only one doing this work. And unfortunately, a lot of the media that has the largest audiences, I have noticed, are pretty actually fucking sex negative, even if they are lauded for being empowering and open and just their raw selves. I'm like, could we be our raw selves while still practicing safer sex and compassionate communication?
Whether without a condom? No, before then. Okay, that's the end of my rant. Another question I have, body hair preferences for myself or partners. I don't care that much about other people. I mean, I also have not encountered a human that like had so much hair that I like couldn't do whatever I needed to do. So I don't foresee it being a problem. based on what I know about humans, but I don't know.
I've been with some incredibly hairy partners. I love hair. I love body hair. I love smoothness. I love all of it. However you are, that's good. I would say if you have really sensitive skin and hair removal will cause ingrown hairs and or scabs, like open wounds, that's been the biggest bummer about hair removal. Is like I meet someone and they're like covered in razor burns, so now it becomes a safety issue because any open cuts or wounds, even if they're tiny little things, mean that we have to play differently because condoms don't cover that part. So if a genital region is covered in razor burn, like if they have a pussy, great, fine, we can use laurels, we can play safely. But if they're a penis haver, then suddenly it's actually hard to safely fuck. So I would err on the side of hair, and I lately will keep more hair on myself because I have gotten really into, not a ton, like my hair never got that bushy anyway, but I will keep like at least a little bit. I kind of keep it trimmed because I don't like to get pinched in my clothes or undies, but I like it when my hairs can get touched without my skin getting touched. Like I've been really into those subtle sensations. I'm doing it right now with my arm hairs, and it just feels so good because the hair follicles have nerve endings, and I really love that. And I've really enjoyed my hairy partners, like on the body, on, there are, when it's not yet a soft beard and when it's just stubble and that burn, like that causes burns on my skin, especially if it's my pussy or neck region, that's a bummer. Like be completely smooth on your face or have a nice soft beard. Like I definitely think stubble is hot looking, but like in that case, don't exfoliate me with it, please. At least not my sensitive parts. If you want to like work on my shins or my feet with your stubble, that's totally cool with me.
For myself, I actually really like to be clean shaven in the pubic area. That is for me. I would never do it. I know that some people are like, women, grow your hair out. Great, grow it out. I love the sensation of skin on skin.
I do also really love very smooth skin on skin. Like when I do fully shave or when I am like totally bare, I love that softness. I mean, I'm a sensation slut, okay?
More so, I actually care about it less if I'm fucking a dude or playing around with someone. But for myself, for masturbation purposes, I love skin on skin. So I do try to shave. I use an electric razor because I have extremely sensitive skin and I'll get crazy, crazy bumps that are very painful if I wax, or even I tried sugaring, didn't work for me. This is not really in the sex category, but it's related. And yeah, regular razors can't do it. Interested in laser hair removal, need to do some more research. And I don't know if there's enough long-term research for me to go there yet, but curious, definitely curious. My future hopes, goals, and dreams for my sex life, I want to have great sex for the rest of my life. I want to find ease and delight in the communication around it, in the search for partners. I get really nervous when it comes to sleeping with new people. I get so nervous. I don't know why. Every single time, I just get nervous. It's not like I think they're going to judge me. It's just like maybe irrational fear. And I think that's intensified now that I'm into kink because I'm like, I don't know how to find a new partner. I don't know if I'm going to like the same thing. I don't know. And it's sort of the same things that you're afraid of each time you go looking for a new person.
It's so funny because the way that I'm like, every time, when you do this, this podcast has made me hypersensitive to the fact that we all have incredibly unique experiences. So now before every podcast, I do prep each guest by saying, we're a really big fan of I statements here. And I've noticed that when I have a guest on who's like, when you do this and you do that, and when you're like this, and you know how you are when you're la la la, and it's just a very normal way for people to speak. However, it causes a fuck ton of confusion in the world. And that's when I get the most emails from listeners that are like, that person was bossy. That person was a know-it-all. That person, and I looking back, realized that I have had some big, majorly disconnected experiences because I'm a little literal-minded person that's like, if someone's like, when you are like this, I'll be like, yes, I do. Or, no, I don't know about that. And I will really apply it directly to me rather than the idea that one person is like this. But also we are all so fucking unique. And like, yes, in that uniqueness, we all have our similarities. And that's what this podcast has taught me more than anything. But I think that little statement is funny. And also it is funny because I still am as nervous as ever to approach partners in my personal life. I can fucking lead the shit out of any professional container. I'm like, you need me. It's my job to be in charge right now and serve and make you feel good and all these. I can do that. Whatever we're doing, like in whatever medium we're working, I got you. It's not even about me being willing to receive pleasure. It's about I need a lot of trust building and mutual care building and evidence of safety and evidence that that person in my personal life that is about to hold space for me is capable of holding space for me in order for me to want to engage. So I have all kinds of stories about like all the reasons that it's quote unquote hard to find a new partner. And I know we all have our own version of that. And that is what I'm just letting go of because I really do believe that the more that, because I really have learned that the more that I set a clear intention on the what, the how figures itself out. And now neuroscience is supporting that. It's not just hippie woo manifestation stuff.
And not that I'm looking, but you know, I'm open. I'm into open relationships in general. Okay, home stretch. Family. What would they think if they heard this?
Okay, that's so funny. I do not remember having this question, and I don't know when I retired it. Probably pretty early on.
So they are supportive. I don't imagine they'll listen to it. If they heard it, I think they would be maybe a little bit shocked or surprised. And I don't think they would ever say anything about it. I hope. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's good to have open relationships. I never had that with my parents growing up. So it would just be honestly hard for me to imagine now if they heard it. I don't know if my sister doesn't care. We share details. My brother, I don't think he wants to know this stuff. So, you know, and if my 92-year-old grandma heard it, I think she would say something hilarious because she's got some good one-liners. If I could go back and give a younger version of myself sex advice, what age would I pick and what would I say? I think I could have picked any adolescent age, maybe. I don't know. So maybe I'd go back to 13 and just say, when sex becomes a thing, don't be afraid to talk about it.
And current me, who has been studying communication, would say, when you are ready to have sex and you found someone you want to have sex with, do feel confident enough to invite them into a conversation about it, even if you don't know where to start. Start by just letting them know that you want to talk about it before you do it, and you want to talk about what's on the table before you do it. And also reflecting on my first experience, like, I have no idea how that would have gone, but I really, especially after hearing so many stories from past guests and lovers who have been really empowered for maybe even no particular reason other than some sort of internal sense of like, yes, I deserve to have what I want and I want to talk about it. I want to feel safe. I want to feel pleasured. I would encourage young me to learn about communication and to just fearlessly practice it and know that when people explode and run away, even if they blech on you and tell you you're bad and wrong, they're really just reflecting their own worst fears about themselves to you and putting it on you.
Which I guess comes back to this entire podcast. But I think that's the best piece of advice I could give myself. Because I think communication around it, or lack thereof, is what led me to have way more mediocre sex than I needed to. So I think that's it for me.
I recently retired this question, although I do still love hearing people's advice to their past selves because it originally was a way to have guests give advice without standing on a soapbox or being an expert or feeling a pressure to like tell the whole world something, right? I think that when I am having a reflection in first person toward myself, it creates space for anyone who's listening to also have their own internal dialogue and to be in conversation with the conversation, even if they never say anything out loud. But I retired this question because so many people would first give answers like, well, no, I think life turned out perfectly how it did. And that was always supposed to be implied in the question. But I now believe that so strongly, I don't want to go back and rewrite history. And I do want to reflect on our past stories and then figure out how we want to use those stories to go forward. So it's not so much that I don't like hearing people's advice to their past selves. I would ask everyone millions more questions if I had like a 6-hour recording chunk with each person, right? 2 hours is already pushing it for most brains and focus time. But I think that I really love inviting people to look toward the future and to specifically think about what we can co-create together.
Lastly, because my very last question is ask me a sex question. I'm not going to ask myself. I've already been asking myself sex questions this whole time. So my last question of this episode for myself is to share a fantasy. Okay, I'm going to share a simple one that is, I got very shy feeling. My current fantasy is to experience a double penetration with 2 men.
If I were going to record this today, I would say 2 penis owners. I also want to have threesomes in all configurations. And I just have learned a whole lot more about queer sex since 2018.
I know this might be extreme for some listeners, even for myself of 2 years ago, or maybe even 1 year ago. I would have been like, oh no, fuck that. No, thank you. I'm not interested. And there's still part of me that feels very intimidated. For those of you who don't know, a double penetration is where one partner is penetrating from like vaginally and one anally. So the idea is that you're filling up the holes. And honestly, I would probably be in a consensual place with people that I had picked out, like not a gangbang scenario.
However, I do now have a very elaborate gangbang scenario that does include double penetration. A friendly gangbang, though. I would like to do a friendly gangbang, and then if that same group wanted to do like a really like animalistic primal gangbang at some point in the future, sure. But the current fantasy includes people like first introducing, shaking the hand, maybe a cocktail hour first, going around the circle, setting intentions. And then I would want, mouth, and then behind, like rotating, and then maybe working up to the double penetration.
I would be interested to see how it feels. I have experienced something with a woman with a strap-on and a man, and I liked it very much. I would also be curious to see if I could get double penetrated and then also like be giving a blowjob, although coordination-wise, it just seems very difficult. And I have this fear of like, I might literally die, like my head might explode, which probably wouldn't actually happen, but those are my feelings.
I could definitely do it.
So that is my fantasy. So now that I'm feeling incredibly vulnerable, I do just want to let you guys know that every episode is going to be totally different. I'm getting a wide variety of different people to come on, and their comfort levels are completely different. And I am just really excited to share what we have with you so far.
And I can no longer remember why that episode cuts off so abruptly. Oh, no, I do. It's because we went back through and cut out all the old outros because I changed my offerings and my brandings and my things so many different times. We cut out all of the old baked-in outros, and now those are all dynamically inserted because technology has updated itself since then. So that gets us up to speed on the original set of questions, which feels at once like way short and not detailed enough, and also includes more detail than I ask people now. It does feel like a lot of effort sometimes to be like, okay, but what about your first oral? Okay, but what about your first, okay, but oral, but giving and receiving cocks and pussies, especially because I talk to so many queer people, it is a lot of ground to cover. So in the 6 years, I have experimented so much with structure, which any of you who have been listening the whole time, you know that. And I think I'm always still striving to follow the other person's lead, which, depending on their communication style, I struggle with sometimes. And sometimes I'm like, oh, I totally get you. And sometimes when I meet someone who has a similar talking type to me, we can talk for way too long. So I'm learning how to schedule better. I'm learning to let people know to prepare for up to 2 hours of recording, especially since this new format is including a first section that is more love and romance based, because that has been coming up more and more in the sex focused parts. So I think going forward, most episodes, depending on the person, depending on the format, depending on what they want to focus on, are going to include a part 1 that talks about love, romance, and connection. And then the part 2 is going to be more about like sex and intentions for the future, including sex, but not limited to sex, because I really do want this to all be about creating a more loving world. And I mean that in the kind of sexual way where we love each other in the general sense, in the specific sense, in the romantic sense, and in the literal fucking fantastic sense. Because I have been hearing from more and more people that casual sex is a fucking bust. And I've heard more and more people identify themselves as demisexual. And when I really get specific with them, and a lot of this is happening off pod, right? They're like, well, I'm just one of those people that like really needs connection. And now I don't identify as demisexual, but the people who like really strongly identify, they're like, no, I need to love you. I need to trust you. I need to all of this stuff. So my thought was always that was kind of at a higher level, and I invite you, all demisexual listeners, please come on and share your personal version. But I am realizing that there's this like idea that it's weird to want connection during sex. And that makes me very sad because I was recently, like just last week, I was having such a nice post-coital cuddle time with a lover who was new to me. And we just were like so on the same wavelength. And he's like, so you're from a farm. Like, that's why you're so grounded in your body. And I'm like, that is not why. Like, that was a cultivated, like, I have tried so hard and also had to give myself so much permission and had to really, really work over the years, and what I can be grateful about with my first dominant is that partner held space for me to really find the current set of edges of my erotic self. So now I need to find someone who can hold space for me to find the new edges, because I'm always a curious explorer. But this partner and I connected over the fact that casual sex without connection makes no sense to us. And we were trying to kind of figure out, even though I don't actually believe in figuring out, I kind of just believe in observing and then choosing my own responses thoughtfully. But we're like, that is so weird that is the norm, And so I think that it is this lack of emotional education, lack of sex education, and all of the fear of rejection, which I still have my version of. I still do get rejected a lot, and that's okay. Not everyone is a fit. And I am still coming to terms with the fact that I scare the living daylights out of many people. Even though I'm nice, I'm not scary. Which is to say I intimidate. And, even my wife and I were out somewhere recently and we were talking to this guy and we were kind of like, two ladies? What do you think? Two goddesses who look like non-biological twins? And he was like, you two are intimidating. And we're like, okay, but like, maybe we're beautiful, but we're nice. We're silly. We're fun. Like, you're really going to pass up this opportunity? And then he's like, oh, you're right. I should talk to you. And then it turned out that he was like living on a different planet. Like, we did not share a reality, so we did not go forward with that connection. But, it is so interesting because now I feel that I'm able to create spaces where people are like a little more honest about why they're rejecting me. And oftentimes they're telling me that they're scared. So I'm like, that's okay. So this new set of questions, this new era, we are bringing in the idea of connection more. The underlying themes that continue to resonate in all of the stories that have good sex, there's usually a container of safety and there's usually a connection. And safety and connection oftentimes can go hand in hand. And ideally, if you are doing something that pushes your, pushes your safety boundaries, it's a safe base container, and then you are adding erotic thrill that is specifically and safely negotiated. I have also interviewed many people who it is very clear that they are thrilled in scenarios that include like unconscious risk. And I feel kind of split about sharing some of those. Like, as a person who creates spaces for us to set examples, I increasingly am learning that humans are mostly mimics, so anything they learn from the media, we are not necessarily all thinking critically about, how does this make us feel? Like, there's a movie that came out that shows a sex worker getting super duper beat up, and a lot of my cinephile friends were like, oh my God, what a great film. Wow, what a great film. I loved it. I really liked it. I really enjoyed it. I love that there wasn't a happy ending. But I'm like, so we get a sex worker who is a stock character. We know nothing about her hopes, goals, and dreams. We know nothing about the guy that she engages with other than he's like a poor party rich boy. She gets physically assaulted. And then there's like a Stockholm syndrome situation. And there's not a point where she is empowered or able to rescue herself. And I'm just saying from my personal experience, that is so different from literally all of the sex workers I've met, which is not to put rose-colored glasses on the experiences that are hard, but to show it in such a one-dimensional way and to turn something like that into a thriller and to kind of like put this negative spin on something that I get it. It's not socially acceptable, but it is very socially normal. So now we're going to dive into the new set of questions, and I'm going to interview myself.